Welcome to the Self-Discovery Files, a place for reflection, challenge, and becoming who you're meant to be. I'm your host, Dylan Phipps. You can find me on TikTok and Instagram at @TheDylanPhipps for more daily insights. Enjoy. Welcome back to the Self-Discovery Files. This is episode 11, and this is the final episode of the year. And with this being the final episode of the year, I want to make this episode a longer, more in-depth episode. I know over the past 10 episodes, from the start till the last episode 10, we've kind of went on a self-improvement arc, self-development arc of different categories, and they all follow each other in order, right? So this is going to more be about wrapping all that up and reflecting upon that, the new year, how to make the new year, your best year, how to implement all of these things, and just kind of closes that off because in the new year we're going to be creating a bunch of new content for my podcast and structuring it in a different way. So, thank you for listening to my podcast. If you've listened to it for the past 10 episodes, if you haven't, go check those other episodes out. I guarantee you can learn something or a few things, teach yourself something, help yourself in some facet of life. But yeah, without further ado, let's hop into this episode because this episode is going to be a fun one, okay? The end of a year um, acts as a psychological checkpoint for yourself. Okay, and I mean that because when the year comes to an end, your brain registers it as a close. Okay, this is why people set New Year's resolutions, right? It's the close so that they can start something new. Okay, and so as a result of that, you can feel pressure, maybe some nostalgia and reflection on the year and things that you've been through. Maybe you're a little bit restless right now because you're eager for the new year and you want to get to work, right? And so this episode is for orientation, okay? We're not going to be reflecting on anything, but it's orienting yourself for the year to come and using the things that you've learned to better yourself. Okay, this episode isn't about what happened in the past. It's about how to move forward without losing what you've learned. Okay? So there are a ton of illusions that we've talked about throughout the 10 episodes of my podcast over the past, couple months. Okay? And so we've talked about the myth of readiness. We've talked about what motivation is and how that differs from discipline. We've talked about the death of validation, how comfort can kill you, how freedom without structure can become chaos, right? And all of those don't survive a year. They don't survive the full year, okay? Readiness, the myth of readiness sounds true, right? It'll give you every single reason to delay until you think you feel ready, right? And people rely on that because it's comfortable. People rely on that because it gives them an excuse to keep doing what they're doing, right? But when that myth of readiness finally disappears, you're forced to confront the action that you've been withholding from taking, right? Motivation. Motivation sounds true all the time. You hear motivational videos or motivational audios or you hear a speech, you get all riled up and people rely on it because it gives you a quick boost of energy and action. And then when it stops working, there is nothing to keep you centered and to keep you on that level of action, and so you drop back down to your normal level of inaction. Right? Validation. Validation can be super withholding in terms of achieving things, right? External validation from anybody feels good, but it kills your identity, okay? And it kills your ability to lead your own life, right? And so that's how people can get addicted to approval and how that can keep them weak. And why it is so much more important that when it stops working, that you rely on solitude and internal work to keep you grounded, right? Comfort. Comfort is such an illusion. Comfort can tie into a ton of these. Comfort is what keeps you stagnant. Comfort is what keeps you in the same place without growing because you don't want to be uncomfortable. That's why people don't like isolation. That's why people don't like facing the things that they've had to go through. That's why people don't like having to address their bad habits and bad actions and bad behaviors that they take on a daily basis, right? Freedom without structure. That's a big one. Okay, freedom is heavy. But without having structure, the unlimited choices that freedom presents to you leads to anxiety, chaos, drift, stagnation, right? If you don't have structure when you have freedom, all of that just becomes heavier. And so all of these illusions don't survive a year. You wonder why people disappear in the gym after 2 weeks. That's because there are these illusions, not just these ones, but illusions similar to this and or including these that disappear. They cannot be sustained over a long period of time. And so through all of these episodes that I've recorded, these certain illusions are broken down so you can actually see the sustainable version of them. Okay? Growth usually begins when the ideas that you relied on quietly stop helping. You start realizing, oh, this actually doesn't work anymore. I might need to change. I might need to do something different. I mean, I did the same thing with readiness, right? When nothing was happening after I had sat there in stagnation for months, even years in some cases, I realized, well, nothing is going to happen unless I take action, and there's nothing that's going to make me ready. Right? For motivation fades and you can feel it in your own body. And when you become self-aware enough to recognize when the motivation dies, you'll finally understand the need and the necessity to develop the discipline muscle. Validation. That is a big one. Validation is a silent trap that most people don't even recognize in their own life. They might think of it as a good thing. They might not understand the silent killer that validation is. And same thing with comfort. People can associate comfort with giving yourself a rest. A lot of people like to talk about balance. But those things only matter if you have everything else in place. You can't have balance when other parts of your life are being sacrificed in order to make yourself feel whole. If you're sacrificing work and uncomfortable situations to do mediocre tasks to then resort to comfort to call yourself balanced, that is what doesn't survive. Freedom without structure. You see it all the time. You see it coming out of high school. You see it coming out of college. There's a lot of structure that needs to be built individually. Self-discipline, right? Structure is needed in order to achieve great things. Freedom without structure. When you have freedom in your life at all, even the slightest bit, if you don't have that structured, it turns into drift. Turns into stagnation. It turns into relying on the things that you know you like, which is usually comfort and validation. Okay, and so these don't survive a year. Right? They introduce costs that you don't expect. And so moving into the new year, if you can identify these areas in which you do have illusions that you believe, or that you're stuck in one of these illusions, but you recognize and you have the self-awareness to also recognize how to break that, then you already have the upper hand because there's a cost in not doing that. Okay, there's hard parts, right? You can't, I don't want you to self-diagnose yourself as broken, right? You might feel loneliness, you might feel boredom and pressure and carrying responsibility without applause from other people, or feeling behind while actually becoming more aware, okay? All of these are side effects of responsibility. Okay, sometimes boredom and loneliness and pressure is a side effect of responsibility. When you're taking care of the things that need to be done, when you're putting yourself first instead of distractions, that is the side effect of responsibility, the loneliness that comes from that. Not going out all the time. You might be a little bit more lonely, right? You might be a little bit more bored and not have as many things to do, but that's a side effect of responsibility, right?
You might feel a little bit of pressure, maybe from your friends, right? Maybe you don't go out one night and you choose to stay in, or you go home early and you feel the pressure of your friends trying to tell you to stay, right? That's a side effect of responsibility, and that's just one example. And it's also a sign of awareness increasing, okay? Carrying responsibility without applause. You don't need other people cheering you on to be responsible, okay? And having that awareness increasing allows you to make those decisions of responsibility without needing other people to notice it. Okay, these are all costs of not numbing yourself. You're going to feel all of these, but as a result, it's going to make you stronger, right? Being and becoming more conscious doesn't make life easier. It makes it clear for you. And that's where clarity erupts. This is where people finally see the world as it truly is, and they're not hiding behind anything to dull it, to distract them, or to alter the perspective of it at any facet. So, if you felt anything like that, and even in the upcoming year, if you start to face this growth and you start to feel the hard parts of growing and self development, don't think you're broken. Don't think that there's something wrong with you. You're human and you're feeling the exact feelings you're supposed to feel for your journey. What I like to do and what's always helped me when going through hard times of any kind is to ask myself, instead of why is this happening to me, what is wrong with me, or any negativity in that manner, I ask myself, what is this teaching me? And so that reframes that as a positive instead of a negative. And even if there is nothing that it's teaching me, well, then okay, then I know it's just something that will pass that is just negative at the moment. And so going into the new year, there is a couple of things that should hold for you. Okay, I'm going to give you very solid things that actually hold, okay? Principles that you can actively employ to increase your self development, increase yourself, and grow yourself. Maybe in places that you actually wouldn't have expected, okay? So the first principle is that structure protects freedom, right? We know this. I've talked about this. Okay, freedom without structure only allows yourself to drift and to stagnate and to rely on comfort. Okay, if you have freedom, you need to structure it. And that actually gives you more freedom because you have choice over what your freedom is. You're not controlled by the freedom. So, in this next year, if you have any sort of freedom, I want you, instead of seeping into the freedom and letting the freedom control you as sort of a floating empty space for you to relax and balance out all of the chaotic stuff in your life, give it structure. Give it structure and watch how much clearer your mind gets. Because when you have structure that in any facet, even if it's a structure for relaxing, that allows your mind more bandwidth to make other decisions. When you have structure on even the basic actions in your life, waking up and brushing your teeth, your morning routine, your night routine, your middle of the day work routine, your break rules. When you have structure for that, your brain doesn't have to use willpower to make those decisions. Instead, it automatically does them, and now you have more willpower to spend towards the work and not feel as drained. So, that is the first principle I want you to focus on in the new year. Okay? The next one, standards. Standards outlast motivation. Okay, when you raise your standards for yourself, you're going to hold yourself to a new level of production and action. Motivation can spike those. You've seen it. You've probably done it. Okay, you've seen people, they get super motivated. They wake up at 3 in the morning, they go on a run, they come home, they eat a good breakfast, they have a super productive day. The next day, they sleep in, they don't set their alarm, they wake up, they eat, a small breakfast, they don't go on a run or go to the gym. They're not studying, they're not being productive. And it's this up and down roller coaster of action. And so the only way to get that motivation, maybe not to the peak of what it could be at peak motivation, because that's just a different state, But the only way to get yourself to sustain that kind of action over a long period of time is with standards. Standards that you hold for yourself through and through anything. Because when you set high standards for yourself, or even just a standard of action for yourself, that raises the bar for your minimal effort. And it puts a sort of structure for you to have to take action. And so over time, that standard is employed and becomes your normal. All of that will outlast motivation. So in the new year, set yourself standards for what you want to accomplish, and don't play it easy on yourself. Don't try to sit there and give yourself a comfortable standard so that it's easy to reach. Make it demanding of work. Don't make it too hard, but make it demanding of work and make yourself actually have to focus on it. Okay? The next principle is that identity follows behavior. Okay? You can't change yourself in the blink of an eye, right? You need to form new connections within your brain. You need to change your behavior. So when I say identity follows behavior, I mean you change your behavior first and then it changes your identity. Okay? Let me give you an example of this. Let's say you're not a clean person. Okay, let's say your room's always messy and you always have clothes all over the floor and clothes on your bed and everything unorganized, right? And you're like, man, I wish I was an organized person. And you're like, I could never be an organized person. Well, you're not going to get there through anything other than behavior. Okay? If you start picking up your room and you start keeping your clothes like that and you start being organized, that identity of being organized will follow that behavior. Okay? You don't become a bodybuilder through thinking you're a bodybuilder. You become a bodybuilder through the behavior of working out. And so, any identity that you see for yourself, that you want to accomplish, that you want to achieve, that is only going to be achieved through behavior. Okay, if you want to achieve a certain level of wealth, a certain level of success, that in itself is an identity, and you need to associate the behavior with the outcome, because one cannot happen without the other. So in this new year, if you have an identity or a goal or some sort of measure of success that you want to achieve, instead of focusing on the end result, focus on the behavior and the inputs that you can do to make that a reality. Okay, the next one is that evidence builds self-trust, right? Self-trust is huge. If you don't have self-trust, you're not going to be able to follow through on your own word. You're not going to stay true to when you make promises to yourself. And the only way to build self-trust is through evidence, through following through on your promises, following through on the statements that you make to yourself. Because when you don't, what happens? Every time that you give a statement to yourself, you make a promise to yourself, your brain registers it as unimportant. It registers it as something that you can just brush over. Same thing as if you're talking to somebody whose opinion you don't respect and they give you advice. You're going to brush over it like whatever. Okay? So build the evidence in self-trust. Set small goals. Follow through on them. Prove that you can follow your own word and your own demand. Because when you do, in the new year, you go into the new year and you build self-trust in yourself. No action that you can think of will you not be able to do, because now you have the self-trust to follow through on any action. And so this kind of ties into the last one that I want to talk about. And this one might be the most important one. It is direction over speed. Okay, direction over speed matters because it doesn't matter how fast you're moving if you're not moving in the right direction. See, if you're moving in the right direction, you'll get there at some point, no matter how fast you're going. But if you're not aimed in the right direction, it doesn't matter how fast you're going, you're never going to reach your destination. And so people misunderstand and think that they have to go super fast and they have to complete all these things in order to, figure out where they want to go or achieve everything. And that's exactly wrong. As long as you're in the right direction, it will come. And that develops the virtue of patience. So focus on direction over speed. When you live this, you'll have this subtle security in yourself that you're going to achieve what you want to achieve and what you envision for yourself. It's a subtle comfort in knowing that you can achieve what you had thought for yourself. And so all of this to say that stability in life doesn't come from certainty, it comes from alignment. Okay? And that is essentially the backbone of this whole episode, okay? In your life, alignment is one of the most important things to focus on. Because, like anything in your life, you can't achieve it unless you're aligned towards it. You can't achieve comfort if you're not aligned towards comfort. That's like trying to put yourself in an uncomfortable position in order to feel comfort. It's a conundrum in itself. And so, alignment is one of the most important things that you can apply to anything in your life. So, this coming year, I want you to let go of timelines, old timelines. Okay, reflect on the past year and use those lessons and use those experiences to your advantage, but don't hold on to them. Don't let them have any emotional hold on you. Don't let them have any control over any willpower or mental bandwidth in your head. Let them go because they're in the past for a reason. Okay, release the need to prove anything to anybody. Because you don't need to prove anything to anybody except for yourself. Yourself should be the only person whose opinion matters. Because it's your life. Okay? I know it's easy to look back on old memories and events and hold on to them because it gives you a sense of control. And maybe even the need to prove something gives you some sense of direction and motivation and energy, but you need to redirect that. Because, like I had said at the beginning of the episode, those illusions and those sources of energy don't survive a year. They're not long lasting. You need to set standards instead of motivation. And so, this is where all these concepts can come into play, and you see how they're starting to interweave together. Entering this next year, if you set goals, don't pretend to have clarity if you don't have it. It's okay to be unclear. It's okay to not have everything figured out. And in fact, that's where a lot of the beauty can come in. Because with that freedom, you can then give that freedom structure. The clarity that you don't have is freedom. It's a certain kind of freedom that now you can design, that now you can structure however you want. And again, the goals that you have, you know what you want, but now you can align yourself in that direction using the structure that you've built and the standards that you set for yourself to then employ behavior to create the identity and build evidence to achieve your goals. And so you see all of these work together in concert to make your goals become a reality. So enter it without clarity. And I would encourage you to have faith and have trust, whether it's religious or not. Right? If we're talking about faith, have faith in God. Have faith that you're on the right path that He set you on. And if you want to talk about individually, how about having faith and trust in your own set of wings? Right? One of my favorite quotes that I've heard over the years is, a bird that lands on a branch doesn't trust the branch to hold him up. He relies on his wings to keep him up. Because if the branch breaks, he knows that he can fly away and still be good. So have trust in those wings, whether that's God or whether that's yourself. Okay? Have integrity over the outcomes that you achieve. If you have integrity, that's all that matters. The outcomes will come, right? Direction over speed. And so when you show up without attachment to those outcomes, they're going to come faster than you think. Think inputs over outputs. Okay? You don't need clarity about everything. You just need honesty in how you move. And so just take a minute. Put some self-reflection in this New Year's. Do some self-development this next year. You realize that this next year is your oyster. You can make of it whatever you want. It does not exist yet. And you have the freedom to make it what it is. The only thing that's limiting you is the illusions that keep you from acting. So take action, inspire others along the way, help others along the way, keep yourself grounded. And for all of that, the world is your oyster. And so I don't want to ramble on too long about all these different things, but um, the new year is a perfect time to realign yourself, especially for those that like a checkpoint to do so. It is the perfect checkpoint, it's the perfect psychological checkpoint. Start of the year gives you that mental clearance to be able to start something new, right? It gives you that loop closed in your brain, like it's always searching for, to be able to start something new. So use this next year as opportunity, because I guarantee you that you can achieve greater things than you've ever thought you could. You just have to get after it. So, thank you for listening to this episode of the podcast. This is the last episode of 2025. If you've listened this far, I just want to thank you. Thank you for supporting me, and thank you for listening to my thoughts for the past 10 episodes if you have. These episodes will get a lot more in depth in the next year. And of course, as with what I preach, I will be developing. So just stay tuned for this. I'm sure if you stay, you will learn a lot more things from me. If you haven't already, follow the podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon, or YouTube. They come out every Monday at 12 Eastern Standard Time. So stay tuned for that. Follow me on my socials at the Dylan Phipps on TikTok and Instagram. We'll be getting back to posting. Have a happy New Year's, you guys. Enjoy the rest of this year and make 2026 the best year that you've had. I'll see you next week for the first episode of 2026.
Thanks for listening to the Self-Discovery Files. My name is Dylan Phipps. Keep showing up for yourself, stay grounded, stay curious, and keep becoming who you're meant to be.